Now we're ready to get started with the skinning process. First thing I want to go over is some of the tools we're going to be using. As you can see, I have on latex gloves. That's very important for safety reasons and just to keep your hands clean. I also have on a white Tyvek suit. These are disposable suits, they're inexpensive, and it actually helps to protect your clothes really good. If somebody would actually pull into your driveway and you have to deal with a customer, you can quickly take this off. This is just, in this spray bottle, is just cold water. This is actually for feather protection, and it helps us to part the feathers, see actually where we're cutting a little bit better. This is powdered borax. You can get this from Mackenzie Taxidermy Supply. This is for feather protection and to help soak up any blood or other fluids from the turkey as we're skinning. It helps to protect the feathers. We have a scalpel handle and a size 22 blade. That's what I use for all my turkey work, is a size 22 blade. And then just a curved scissors. You can get this from any taxidermy supplier. I actually bought this one right from Mackenzie. So we'll actually get started here by loading up our scalpel blade. I like to start with the tail of the turkey. Since it's fairly delicate and I don't want to be pushing on this or getting any blood on it through the rest of the skinning process, I like to get this removed from the turkey first. First thing I'm going to do is lift the hackle feathers up to expose the top part of the tail. Take my cold water in my water bottle here and just spray those feathers. This helps to protect them and it helps to see where I'm making my cuts. We're going to be making our first cut directly on top of the tail coverts, which are these feathers here. We're just going to be going straight back and underneath the hackle. The goal here is to release the tail. My scalpel blade is just riding right along the quills of the tail feathers as we're moving back. I'm going to grab my scissors and I'm going to cut this one bone right here that releases that entire top area. I'm going to flip the bird on its back. Lift up the under wing coverts. Spray some more water in here to part the feathers and protect the feathers. We're going to take our scalpel, and again, we're going to be going right along the tail quills of the feathers. Right between the under tail coverts and the tail. This is the same procedure you'd use for moving a tail for a tail mount, in case you're doing that. The under tail coverts, which are these feathers here, are going to stay with the turkey throughout the mounting process. We have all that released. Just going to grab the tail and pull it out. See what it looks like. Obviously we have a lot of meat to clean off of that. We're going to be doing that later. At this point, I would actually recommend just freezing the tail up until you're ready to work on it. Simply put it in a plastic bag to do that. Now we're going to be removing the legs. I need to talk a little bit about the type of incision we're going to be using for our turkey mount. On all of my turkey mounts, I case skin them or use a leg to leg incision. The incision starts here at the heel or base of the leg, moves through here in a U shape up to the other leg. Quite a few taxidermists will actually use a breast incision when they're mounting turkeys. I see no real benefit in using a breast incision, as it can compromise the actual breast feathers during the skinning and fleshing process, and it doesn't allow you to set the form completely up like we're going to be doing in this course, so you can see all of the anatomy working together before we actually sew the turkey onto the form. To start that incision, I take my cold water. It's going to be spraying all of the feathers. Again, this allows us to part the feathers, and the water on the feathers helps to protect them. We're going to be going on the inside of the drumstick. This is the easiest place to hide our incision. I like to start in the center of the drumstick. I'm going to work my first incision down to the leg. Right to where the actual feather line stops is where I'm stopping with my cut. I'm going to finish my cut up through the center of the drumstick, directly across towards the other drumstick. Might be a little difficult to see that, but I'm going right across, right through this feather group here. You're not going to see it on the mount. I'm coming to the center of that feather group and I'm stopping, and I will meet up with that incision when I do the other side. Now I need to remove the rest of the drumstick feathers where they attach to the top of the leg. So I'm going to take my water again. Wet it down so I can see what I'm doing. See, I'm just pulling those feathers back so I can see where I'm working. Our incision is going to be right where those feathers stop, where they meet the leg. It's going to be going around in a circle and detaching that skin from the leg. I'll just finish that off underneath. See, by wetting those feathers down, we're protecting them from any of the meat and grease and blood that could come out, and you also give us a clear shot to see exactly where we're making our cuts. Turn the bird on its side a little bit more. Now we're just going to skin out the drumstick. I'm actually going to take a little bit of my water and I'm just going to spray it on these breast feathers to protect them a little bit more. You can't get too much water on these feathers during this process. Simply grabbing onto the skin and skinning it away from the drumstick. I'm going to be going right to the other side, and then I'll finish off my cut from the other way. Kind of follow along with what I'm doing. Just lifting this up. It skins away very easily. You can actually almost work your thumb in there to separate the skin from the drumstick. We're going to finish off our cut from the other side. I'm just grabbing onto the edge of the skin, pulling it back. We're going to be meeting up with our other cut from the other side. Okay, we're very close to meeting up with that cut. And what I like to do at this point is grab onto the skin with my left hand and kind of pull it down. From an angle, I can easily see what I'm doing. I'm just going to meet up with that cut. Kind of hard to see on camera here. You can see that the cut is met up. I'm just going to finish it all the way back and release the skin from the entire drumstick. Skin is fairly thin in this area, so you want to take your time. Luckily, if you do put a hole in this area, you're not ever going to see it. Okay, now we have our skin completely detached from our drumstick. We're actually going to be removing the drumstick and the leg at this point. We're going to be doing that by cutting straight down from the joint, from the femur bone, which is something we will not be concerned with. That actually goes up into the form, and the drumstick. There's a joint right here where my thumb is, and if you move the drumstick, you can feel that, and that's where we want our scalpel blade to go down. We're going to be cutting straight down. You can hear that little snap as we're cutting those tendons. There we have our leg removed and the drumstick, and we'll be needing the entire drumstick area and the leg. Now we'll repeat the process on the other side. Now we're going to finish off our incision up the other drumstick and complete our case skinning. We're cutting right through the group of feathers. Don't worry about cutting through these group of feathers at all. That our incision and stitches will hide very easily, especially with a full strut pose. We want to do the least amount of sewing as possible. So we're just coming straight over towards the other drumstick. Again, we're wetting these feathers down. Repeating the same process we did on the last drumstick. If you do catch a few feathers in here, it's not a big deal. You're not going to see them. Okay, we've made our incision up to the base of the leg. Now we're just going to make our cut all the way around where the feather line stops and the leg starts. Cutting right through the skin. finishing our cut around. After you've done this a little bit, you can see you can get pretty fast at doing this. You should be able to have a turkey skinned out within 15-20 minutes, no problem. Okay, now we're just going to skin our drumstick the rest of the way out, just like we did on the last one. You want to keep all the tendons and as much meat as possible on the drumstick. It's not hard to do on the actual drumstick. The meat does not want to stick to the skin here. We're just skinning around and meeting up with our other cut. See, we have it separated now. Our cuts from both sides have met. Just skin it the rest of the way down. Again, throughout the entire skinning process, you want to avoid putting any holes in for obvious reasons. You don't want to make any unnecessary work for yourself with sewing, but it also helps to protect the feathers during the flushing process if there's no holes. If you do make a very large hole, I would recommend sewing that up before you even start flushing. Our skin is now completely separated. We're going to take our finger again and find that joint. Right here where my index finger is. Again, we're just going to drop right into the drumstick meat. This is where the tibia meets the femur. You can hear that little snap as we separate it away and release it. We have both of our legs and drumsticks removed. You can go ahead and put this in a bag and freeze it until we work on it later. Now we're going to be removing the rest of the skin near the rump area of the turkey and the tail area from the carcass. We're going to be starting to fold that skin back around towards the hackle because eventually we're going to be hanging this entire turkey up to finish the skinning process. But we need to separate this part so we have a place to put our hook in. We do that on the workbench. Get these feathers sprayed up with our cold water to protect them and help get them out of our way. Just grabbing onto the skin and we're pulling it as I'm skinning it back. You can see this part of the turkey is the keel. Familiarize yourself where we're at as we're moving. Okay, now we're near the vent area. This is kind of a tricky area to skin, and you might actually put some holes in here. It's hard to know exactly where you're at. It's a good area to put a hole in because it hides very easily and there's no feathers to protect. So during the flushing process, if there would be a little hole, it's not going to matter. Okay, now as we're right at the vent, we're going to actually lift the turkey up, set it a little bit more upright. Again, we're kind of letting gravity pull the carcass this way. I'm pulling the skin this way towards myself. And kind of see where that actual skin line is as we're skinning it and pulling it back. It's okay if you leave a little bit of extra meat on the skin at this point. It's easier to remove later. Now we're at our tail opening, so you can see things have opened up here. That's where we took our tail out. As you move towards the back and towards the hackle, the skin is very thin. This is the thinnest area actually on the turkey. I'm going to swivel this thing a little bit so you can see exactly what I'm doing here. Just pulling that skin away from that carcass and letting the knife do most of the work. We just want to do this enough so we can actually put our hook into it, we'll be using to hang it from the ceiling. This is plenty. That's all you have to go back. We'll be putting our hook in here. But before we can put the hook in, we need to remove the head, and we'll do that next. Now we need to detach the head before we can hang the turkey up to finish the skinning process. We're going to be sending this head out to a freeze dryer. You can also use an artificial head. Normally I would recommend using a freeze-dried head. That's what most clients want. One of the main advantages of using a freeze-dried head is you get all these natural hairs that you're seeing on the head back with it. If you use an artificial head, you don't get those. You can glue those onto an artificial head, but it never looks the same. Regardless if you're using an artificial or a freeze-dried, you remove the head from the carcass the same way. It's very important that we wet down these feathers. These feathers are very delicate and they're a focal point on the mount. By wetting them down, we're protecting them and it's giving us a clear area. Okay, I'm just separating those feathers away. I'm going to start my incision right where the feathers end and the head starts. There's not an exact area that works for this, but I like to do it right at that basic line where you can see my finger running. Coming underneath these major carnicles. Moving up towards the back of the head. Again, the feather line basically stops here. We're just going to be coming right along here. I like to leave a little bit of extra skin with the turkey. You can always cut it off if you need to. Because this bird is going to be a full strut, this area is going to be buried behind it when it's in the full strut pose, so you're not going to see this. If this was a standing mount or a flying mount, this would actually be more of a focal point on the mount. Be a little bit more careful back here. Bringing our cut down the other side. Again, we're heading towards the underside of the major carnicles, which is right here. Going to flip the turkey around. Get a little bit better view of this side. Cutting underneath that carnicle. The only area I need to cut now is just underneath these three major carnicles. And again, it's right where the feather line stops, directly underneath the carnicle. Our cut has been made. What I do is I just start pulling the head up and away from our feathers. Going to cut at the vertebrae. This cut is not critical at all. The freeze dryer will cut the rest of this out and use just what they need to use when they actually get it from you. Most of the time, with most freeze dryers, they're going to cut the rest of this neck vertebrae out right to the back of the skull, and then they'll clean the skull out from this way. But this is sufficient for now. What we do with the head is we just rinse it off and make sure it's nice and moist. We'll put it in a plastic bag and freeze it. and we'll get that sent off to the freeze dryer. Now we're ready to hang our turkey up and finish the skinning process. Now we're ready to hang the turkey up to finish the skinning process. We're going to let gravity help us do this. It's much easier to skin them out this way through the rest of the skinning. Also, if there's any blood or other fluids that are leaking out, they'll leak towards the floor instead of pooling up on your bench. You can use a hook and a rope to do this. In this case, I just have 6-gauge wire where I sharpen an end on it, and I push that right through the back of the turkey, hook it up, and this loop will go to a hook that's actually hanging in the ceiling. So we'll go ahead and get our turkey hung up. Kind of bring these feathers down. Now that we have our bird hung up, we're going to start pulling the skin back. We're going to be skinning with our 22 blade scalpel, starting on the back. Just pulling that skin down. Again, this is a very thin area, easy to put holes in here, especially if the bird's been in the freezer for a while. If it's starting to freezer burn a little bit, this is where it's going to show up, and this is where you're going to get some holes. See a few shot holes right there. Don't have to worry about those. Not going to hurt anything. Okay. And just start skinning down the side. I kind of like to move down on the whole turkey at once, so I keep swiveling the bird and skinning it down as I'm going. You don't want to necessarily try to skin down too much on one side. It's easier if you move the whole thing down at once. Just swivel this around. You see the breast feather area. And this is the beauty of actually case skinning a turkey. You're protecting all the very delicate breast feathers this way. Work on the back a little bit more. Right now we're working down to the wings. You want to work them down to the wings on both sides so you're at the wing joints at the same time. See, we're just still at our hackle yet, moving towards those mantle feathers and the neck feathers. I'm going to swivel them around again. Normally one scalpel blade will skin out an entire turkey. Sometimes you may need to change up at this point. If you're scratching on the bones a lot during removal of the drumsticks, you might need to change them up. You don't want to use a dull blade for this. Okay, we're going to work on this side a little bit now. A little difficult to see, but we did the same thing we did on the other side. We're just working down the breast feathers. We're going to continue working down towards the wing on the left side. We did switch to a rope to hang the turkey from since we're spinning it a lot for the video. Normally I just use that wire setup. If you're going to be turning the turkey a lot, it's a good idea to have a rope and a hook set up. What we're working down towards now is the area where the humerus bone is actually meeting up into the form. we're going to be cutting the ball joint directly against the humerus bone when it enters in. And release a little bit more of this hackle because we're at that joint now, but I don't want any extra tension. Once this is removed, the skinning process is going to be much easier. You might be able to just see where that ball is on the video. It's kind of hard to see, but if you're skinning, you will see that. You can actually take your finger there and feel where that is. We're just going to put our scalpel in there. You can hear that little snap. You can see how it's opening up. Now the skin actually tucks up underneath that humerus bone, which is right here. This is the ball of the humerus bone. So when we're skinning, you want to be careful you don't skin too quickly, or you want to carefully skin this away so you don't cut the skin. It's okay to leave some of the meat right with the humerus bone at this point. It's easy to remove later. We don't want to cut through that skin. Okay, I'm working on the hack a little bit more and working down towards the rest of the wing meat and separating this from the carcass. That's enough on that side for now. We will turn it around and do the same thing on this side. Okay, we're pulling that skin down. You can see right there on my scalpel is that is the end of the humerus bone. That's where our scalpel is going to be coming in. You can hear that little snap as it's being released. Cutting through a few of the tendons. And that gravity is helping to pull it down. Cut through the rest of this meat. Be careful not to cut through the skin. Okay, now we're going to be skinning down on the breast area of the bird. You can start to see the beginning of the sponge sac. That's what actually holds the air that gives the turkey expansion when it's in full strut. That's the area that's real gummy and difficult to actually work with during the fleshing process. You'll know it when you hit it. And you want to go slow in this area. It can be a little difficult to see where you're at. We're at the back of the neck here, skinning down. We're just going to swing over to the other side. Continue skinning it down. You can see I'm just continuously turning the turkey and skinning down. Where we're at right now is we're entering the crop area. That's where they store food. It's crunched up before they digest it. The skin can actually be up into that crop area a little bit, so you want to go slowly through this area. Okay, you can see with my left hand I'm pulling down at the same time I'm scalpeling the skin away from the carcass. See that this bird was definitely strutting a lot. The expansion area on the bird is very full. We actually take a note of that at this point because you may actually want to put it on a little bit bigger form to accommodate that. If you're seeing a lot of this sponge area on the turkey, it tells you that it was a very busy strut and there's a lot of expansion there. Okay, and we just skin it right off the neck and it'll basically just fall off. I'm going to set our skin aside on a clean part of our workbench. At this point, we could actually freeze the turkey skin right like it is, and we could finish the fleshing process later on, or you could jump right into fleshing. As long as we have the carcass hung up, we're just going to take a quick look at it. Just quick grab the head. Basically see how this would be connected. You can see that a lot of the neck is actually into the carcass. So if you were going to measure this neck and you were trying to recreate the entire neck during the mounting process, you'd have to accommodate for that. And that's especially important with a standing pose or a gobbling pose. On a full strut pose, I'm not concerned at all about the neck length. And we'll go into that more in depth as we prep our form. As you can see looking at the carcass, that sponge sac area that they actually capture air in when they're strutting is not located in this part of the form. It's located up in this part of the form. And that skin is being drawn across this. Something to keep in mind as we're working with the form the rest of the way. As far as taking any measurements on the carcass, it's really not necessary since we're going to be buying commercial forms. Normally what I recommend is buying a number of forms in the size range close to your turkey, and then we'll fit them after the bird is completely flesh washed and dried. If you were going to try to carve your own form, you would definitely want to take some measurements. I would not recommend that. I would definitely just buy a commercial form and just make some modifications of that if you feel you need to. One important measurement you could take is the wing-to-wing measurement. But again, on the forms we buy, that is accurate. It's not necessary to do that. So at this time, we can discard the carcass and we can freeze our skin up until we move into the fleshing process.